Michael, yep, you're unmuted. Okay, excellent. We're rolling. Ladies and gentlemen, we have as our very special guest tonight on a very special ESW webcast, Michael Yon. Some of you in our audience are familiar with him. This is the fourth time we've had him on the program. The first time in 90 days, we had him last in the program for our third show with him in mid-December with V, the Grill Economist, aka Vijay Varghese, our ESW CEO. Co-hosting with me, your host, James Smith, editor-in-chief and publisher of Exit Strategy World, soon exitstrategy.world, soon to be exitstrategyworld.com. And we're very happy to have Michael joining us live from Panama tonight. This is a live stream. So, Michael, without further ado, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me back on. I'm in Panama now. It's dark here. It's Central Time. So it's, Central Time. So it's 10 at night and everything's quiet. The electricity went out last Saturday night. There was an explosion at one of the main power generation places, and electricity went out in many parts of Panama. It was reported all over Panama, but there were pockets where there was electricity, but mostly it went out. So a lot of Panamanians thought that the United States was invading, because that's what happened during Just Cause in 1989, was all the electricity went out. And of course, then people started parachuting in and that sort of thing. So it was a safe guess. People's phones still worked. So they were actually posting on social media that, hey, Americans are invading and that sort of thing. It was a very safe bet, but it turned out to be wrong, luckily. But actually, if your phones are still working, we probably are not actually invading. But you never know. Sometimes when the U.S. does military operations, sometimes they'll shut your phones off, and sometimes they leave them on. If they leave your phones on, it's because they want to know who's communicating. They're probably looking for specific people. That's the way it goes. This is nothing classified. This is the sort of thing that's normal day-to-day operations. And so, but everybody's phones were still working. So anyway, that was an indicator that we actually were not invading. So it's interesting because a couple of months ago, I published that I thought of a few dates when something might happen. And one was March 14th. The electricity went out on March 15th. And the reason I threw March 14th out there, not that I was saying something would happen, but that the probability was increased because it was a full moon and also weekend, and it's dry season and it's Trump season as well. And so, but nothing happened. And now I think this week, though, the chances of violence in Panama are quite high, including possibly tomorrow we'll see on Wednesday. But certainly by Friday, I think the chances are very high. Masako Ganaha and I went to a protest maybe 4 weeks ago now with Suntrax, which is a communist labor union here in Panama. Huge, and not huge, maybe 30 or 40,000 people. Nobody seems to know. And but they're quite violent. And I published, I predicted 90% chance of violence. But while we were out there, the rain just came. This is dry season, but suddenly a thunderstorm came, a lot of lightning and loud and close and a lot of rain, and it broke things up. But Friday, I think this protest on Friday that could shut down big parts of Panama could be more significant because the government is ready to actually confront them on the streets. And so, in fact, the Ministry of Security was public about that, as was Molino, the President Molino. And so they're saying, we're not going to let you block the roads this time. And the people that are going to do the Noble Bugle Indians, which many people watching this have probably heard of them before, but today they put out a message. They're asking all those Indians to go back to their comarca, which is their reservation, because they want to fight. And so they want to collect all their tribe, all their people, let's say, so that they're ready to start blocking roads and doing things. And the Nobe Bugle, they will fight. They've proven that they'll take casualties. This isn't anti-American, by the way. It's per se anyway. Suntrax is anti-American, but the protests are actually about other things. They're mostly about Social Security and this copper mine and some other issues, but it's mostly internal matters. I'm sure you're going to see some American flags burned. I would not even doubt that some Westerners get killed this time. I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm not predicting it, but there are people that would like to see that happen for various reasons. And so may or may not happen. Who knows? And so that's this Friday. They should be having big actions in the Soontracks. They had a meeting, not just Soontracks, but but about 68 unions met last weekend, to discuss and plan what they're going to do this week. And so, they're again planning to shut the country down, actually. And again, the government is saying, we're not going to let you do it. And it's interesting because so many people through the last, 5 years have asked me about the proposition of moving to Panama. And certainly in the last 4 years, I'm like, no chance. I mean, I like Panama. It's a nice, but the long-term stability, I just don't see it. Unless you're up for dramas and that sort of thing, or if you have plenty of money and it's not a big loss for you if you can't get here for long periods of time. It's not like Panama is going to go away, but it could be so active at times that you won't want to be here. And so this is, the Panama is a big juicy lamb. It's wearing a garland of pork chops, and the predators want it, and they want pieces of it. You see these various Indian groups. There's 5 major comarcas, which are reservations. And these are, like the Nobe Bugle Indians reservation, that one only opened in 1997. And I see this around the world. So it's a noble cause. They should have their own reservation and that sort of thing. But I know what actually is going on with that. What's actually going on is it's divide and conquer, whether it's up in Canada or doing the same things with the Ainu people in Japan or all over the world. You'll have these groups that say, hey, you need to have your own homeland. They get them riled up. And like the Bugle now, they've got them on the comarca, the reservation. It's easier now to have a power base and influence that power base, which is then separate or somewhat separate from the main government, right? So the Indians have been protesting a great deal, for instance, at this copper mine, which is very important. And the copper mine has many dramas involved. For instance, the First Quantum, I'm talking about the First Quantum copper mine for those who are tracking on this, nominally a Canadian company, but some of the a big part of the investment is clearly Chinese and other parts unknown. Some of it's hidden. But in any case, the copper mine is currently closed, but that copper mine could bring in more money to Panama than actually the canal does. And the canal is the main source of, income that can be used for instance, the Social Security. So a big problem that they're really angry about, the many Panamanians, is that their Social Security may be cut and the payment levels cut, and you may have to work longer. So they're really upset.
So we sort of seem to have a perfect storm converging. And thank you for that amazing introduction, by the way, Michael, in terms of the politics, the geopolitics of Panama right now, why it is a tinderbox at the moment. That really sums it up for the audience, especially because there's been a lot of dumbing down and people think, oh, it's just about Trump's threats to invade. And that's all that's really going on. And there's a lot more obviously going on since you've been going down there for many, many months now, covering the invasion, the migration situation through the Darien Gap. And we're all very grateful for your independent journalist work with Masako Ganaha, your Japanese good friend and collaborator on that, going around the world and covering one of the biggest stories of our time, which is the Volkswanderung. It's the that's an old German word that the scholars of the 19th century used for the massive migration of barbarian tribes into the late Roman Empire, right? And we're in a late stage empire. Regardless of how you feel about Donald Trump personally or his politics, nobody, even people on the liberal Democrat left now, are saying, wow, we're really in late stage America. The kind of things that you only used to hear during the Obama and especially Biden years from the right? You're now hearing it from the left. And also that there is this revived anti-Americanism that is partly related to, and I'm trying to use anti-Americanism in the most generic way possible. Like, I'm not saying that people should be happy with say, Trump saying that Canada should become the 51st state, for example. I think I happen to have a lot of respect for Canadians and their right to self-determination for the same reason I respect, Austrians' right not to be German or Ukrainians' right not to be Russian. But that being said, there's a lot of things that have been going on, a lot of, I would say, deliberate provocations and efforts to stir people up against each other. And, we've had this wonderful, 140-year relationship with Canada, except maybe for a little, let's say, red planning. I forget what it was called, Operation Red or something like that in the 30s, where we were planning to, if Nazi Germany had taken England, we had a contingency plan. The Department of War back then in the late 30s and early, I think as late as late end of 1940, had a contingency plan to move American troops and equipment into Canada, basically to make sure that Canada would not become like Vichy-fied, sort of like Vichy French North Africa was after the Nazis took over France, I think was the gist of the war plan, Red or whatever it was called back then. So I guess what I'm saying is that, I'm reading these Substacks, Michael, by these Canadian veterans that are deadly serious. I don't want to name them right now on the program, but maybe I'll link up to them in the chat. But these guys are like deadly serious, convinced that Trump is hell bent on. They can already hear the sounds of M1 Abrams clattering down the Rue de Sainte Catherine in Montreal. I mean, it's kind of hilarious. It's sort of a black comedy, like that movie, whatever, the John Candy movie where America invades Canada, and then they had the South Park cartoon as well with the same storyline. But I think it was called Canadian Bacon, right, back in the 80s. And then in the late 90s, early 2000s, you had the South Park bigger, badder, uncut cartoon where the U.S. invades Canada. And like, I'm just looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, well, who's benefiting from all this, right? Like, Key bono, right? That's always the critical question people need to ask. And following the money, whether you're talking about this copper mine and the protests associated with it, for example, or you're talking about the future of the canal. I mean, the canal's obviously, some people would say the canal's seen better days, right? Because you had a drought a few years ago. The water levels were low. That somehow coincided with a lot of the increase in the Houthi attacks on the shipping, even before the Gaza war with Israel broke out in October 7th of last year. And I'm thinking to myself about all of these trends. Like I said, this perfect storm converging. Well, it wasn't last year. I'm sorry. It was October 7th, I believe, of the preceding year. But what I'm saying is that your coverage, your reporting has been sort of at the epicenter of all these converging trends, I think is what I'm trying to say. And that's why we're very happy to have you on the program tonight. And again, we have about, let's say 40 minutes to roll. I just want to kind of give you the floor and give you the opportunity to keep rolling on these themes. So let me go ahead and proceed to the main punch question, which is, how imminent do you think is U.S. military action? You were saying a minute ago, I think on the Alex Jones program yesterday, you were talking about the phases of the moon and whether that was a factor in Pentagon planning. We've had reports, NBC News, I put that in the chat, has reported that the Trump White House has already asked Southcom to develop contingency plans for operations to secure the canal. Obviously, minimal footprint, not going in very heavy, but still, I mean, maybe Panamanians are already joking about it. It sounds like from what you're hearing down there. So are we days? Are we weeks? Are we months away from, let's say, what was it called? Operation Just Cause 2.0?
I don't know. It's clear that the chances of doing something military are quite high. Now, Pete Hegseth should be here in early April. Would he want to come before or after if they're going to do something military? Now, it's clear that a lot of Panamanians actually would like us to take the canal, and there's others that will fight to the death, not for us not to take the canal. And so, and this is important to separate a few things. One is, let's talk about the canal.
Sure.
When we talk about the canal, some people talk about they don't understand how this thing actually operates at all. They think because the Chinese have those ports that they actually operate the canal, but the canal is separate from the ports. The ports are, they're the ports are in the canal, right? And at the mouth of the canal, and also in the canal. But the people that run the locks and run the canal, those are Panamanians, right? Now there are other companies that run the ports, but that's not the canal operations, right? So first the canal was opened in 1914, and then people operated the canal, and then later those ports were built, right? And those at this point are they're separate they're companies, right? It's and so that's that's a separation. Another separation that needs to be made is that the United States doesn't want to take Panama, to my knowledge anyway. They're talking about the canal. So the canal, it used to be a 10-mile stretch right through the middle of Panama. Of course, we created Panama to create the canal, right? So Panama didn't exist. It was it didn't exist as Panama. It existed obviously as a mountain. I mean, as mountains and jungles and that sort of thing. But it didn't exist as a country until we split it off, or helped it split off from Colombia, so that we could make a canal, right? So
Correct.
we created, Panama out of a rib, let's say, of Colombia, and then we created the canal, and so opened the canal in 1914, which is very interesting because the year before that was the Federal Reserve Act in 1913.
Right, and did it open right before or right after World War I broke out in Europe in August of 1914?
Shortly before.
Right.
And coincidentally. And so because all these things are related, the bankers and all that. And if you read the book, The Path Between the Seas, which I have here somewhere, it's a really great book. And read The Creature from Jekyll Island. I think many of your listeners have read that. And
yes.
So if you read The Creature from Jekyll Island, if you remember, or if it's on your bookshelf and you go pick it up and read the Panama section, I think, kind of revamp your memory on it. Unless you've read it recently, you'll go, wait a minute. This is if you study in The Creature from Jekyll Island, obviously you're going to talk about the formation of the Fed and all those dramas around it. If you read The Creature from Jekyll Island and The Path Between the Seas, both of those books will look, they're like brother and sister books. I mean, they should be read together, right? Because you'll see that this is really, really interesting. That the bankers of this one book I've got here, I wish I could show you. I put it on the other table over there. But when
give me the title and I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Oh, here, let me just grab it.
Okay, take your time. Michael Yon, ladies and gentlemen, former U.S. Army Green Beret, highly experienced independent globetrotting correspondent. It's been in over 100 countries. And he has quite the old bookshelf. He is a connoisseur of old books, and wherever he goes in the world, whether it's Japan or Argentina, he collects old books.
Yeah, and I read them too, and it's so interesting because it's important to go places, but it's important to read books. And when you read books about the places that you go to, it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's like 1 + 1 = 3. This is on the Nicaragua Canal. You should see the old maps in these things, man. This is you see the fascicles, how far apart everything is. These are all maps that fold out like this long. You know what I mean? These are like unbelievable maps, so detailed. This is what, 1879 or something. Yeah, you can hardly read it, but it's in actually good condition. This is the Nicaraguan Ship Canal book, actually. Here, Weaponized Migration. That's an important one. And where's the one I wanted to show you? This one's from 1913. This is the year before the canal opened. Actually, this is the Isthmian report to this is a report to the United States government. But anyway, it has the casualties in here. Trump keeps talking about 38,000 killed, which is nonsense. I mean, this 1913 book is.
He might have added exaggerated by a zero at least. It might have been like 3,000 people.
Yeah, he didn't exaggerate much, just like 1 digit zero.
Yeah,
that's approximately right, actually. And
Well,
so
you said there was you did a post about before you show the book. You did a post in your Substack, which I was reading a show prep before we talked, because Michael actually said he wanted to come on about maybe about 3 hours before we booked this show for 10 o'clock Central. So basically, I was doing show prep and I was reading your Substack, which is on the ticker here below for people to click on or find. And you were talking about the Chinese memorial too, which is near the bridge that was built in the early 60s with American taxpayer dollars. And I guess I would assume that's a memorial to all the Chinese workers who came down to Panama to build the canal after, their uncles or their grandfathers or, father's generation had helped build the Transcontinental Railroad.
Yeah, a lot of them were on the railroad. Oh man, something interesting about that. We need to talk about that in a minute. That's quite.
Yeah, please show the book though.
Gosh, I gotta tell you something. So this book is The Path Between the Seas. Everybody should read this path. This book, I think it's from 1977 maybe or something. So but just read it. It's like Creature from Jekyll Island level quality. Creature from Jekyll Island is rare quality. But if you read The Path Between the Seas and The Creature from Jekyll Island, you'll be much more studied up on what's going on. And so in any case, let's talk about the and then we'll get to some more of the books. But
we're going to talk about China now.
Oh, China. I found these 4 books in the library the other day. I spent 3 days last week in the library. I just canceled everything and went to the library. And so I found these 4 books, 4 books that were they were the passenger list of people that arrived into San Francisco between about 1848 and 1853. So it's 4 books that are roughly, this big, right? Mm-hmm. And a little bit smaller, but 4 pretty sizable books. So it's got all these huge numbers of ships coming in and their cargo and whatnot. And it's quite interesting because in every ship that came from China, one ship had 553 Chinese on it. But in every ship that had Chinese, they were also carrying opium from China to San Francisco, right? And the reason I say that because I was looking in the index for things like opium, right? And because I spent
your cargo manifest. You're talking about the cargo manifest for each ship
the cargo
bringing passengers.
So the cargo is like one of the ships had from where did that one of the ships, I've forgotten what country it came from. It had like 200,000 oranges and all kinds of other stuff. Anyway, this one ship had 553 Chinese. And it's interesting too, because they'll say, they'll talk about, and all the Chinese in every ship that came, it's unidentified, 188 Chinese, 412 Chinese, 553 Chinese. It was 533 in that one boat. But every single boat that had Chinese, because, I checked the indices of all 4 books, if it was Chinese, they were bringing opium, and opium didn't show up in any of the other ships that did not have Chinese. Anyway, so that was all right. So that's what I'm getting to. So a lot of Chinese who were going to the, everybody's heard about Chinese and the opium wars with the British and all that stuff. Yeah. Well, I read a lot of old books, and you can believe this: Chinese were doing the opium thing long before the British got involved. Very long, right? And so a lot of the opium war in China was Chinese doing the opium trade. British were involved too, no question about it. But China was both exporting and using it themselves. I mean, it's not like they're innocent of this at all. They were doing it before, they were doing it during, and then the British got involved. And then they continued to do the opium trade, and they still do today, whatever the date is today. They still do it, right?
The current year, of our Lord 2025.
They still do it, right? And so anyway, so the Chinese, professional victims are always professional predators. And that's just and that goes for cultures too. If it's like, oh, look at me, look how sad I am, all the things people have done to me, that guy's going to stab you in the back for sure. I've seen this around the world, and the cultures that always are claiming victimhood, they're going to stab you in the back, right? They're predators. And the Chinese Communist Party is highly predacious, right? They're always claiming that victimhood. Anyway, so it's always, look what the British did to us with the opium.
So now, I did want to ask you about the BlackRock sale this has been getting some headlines because this is related to China.
Let me
Please
finish
get to
this
that.
one
Yeah.
story. Let me finish
Sure.
this. So there's this one village that was here, or area that's underwater in the canal now, called Matachin, which might mean, nobody really knows what it means, but it might mean dead Chinese, like Matachin would, and it could mean assassin actually, and a different, anyway, but a lot of Chinese allegedly died there, right? And I think that's actually, they did. And it's interesting because I found one of the books separate from the other four I was talking about, and it talked about, one theory was that the Americans did not let the Chinese have their opium, and it blamed the Americans because we didn't let them have the opium, and then they committed suicide. You know what
You mean it was used as a painkiller back then?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it still is. Like when I was in Afghanistan, they use it as a painkiller. If somebody's hurt, they give the children opium or whatever. What I'm getting to is blaming the British on one side for giving us the opium, and then blaming Americans on the other side for taking it away. It's like, you can't make up this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think the subtext of what you're saying is that they try to say that the Americans taking away the opium or banning it was, it was part of the whole yellow peril, anti-Chinese racism, like just like the idea that the war on drugs, is just an excuse to lock up black men, right? Or anti-marijuana laws were anti-Chicano or anti-Latino, right?
Well, they wanted them to work, and if you're doped up on opium, you're not going to be able to work.
Correct.
You're laying around smoking the pipe.
Yeah. So we were about to get to this sale of this port facility from a Chinese company to BlackRock, and a lot of, let's say, right of center people, obviously even a lot of Trump supporters, are very wary of BlackRock with damn good reason. And I thought I would ask you about that.
Yeah. I mean, if you look on my Substack, you'll see I took a helicopter last week and flew over the ports that in fact, I flew over the whole canal. And so, from one end to the other. And so BlackRock is, Trump's buddy, and BlackRock wants our demographic invasion to continue, right? Explicitly.
They pushed this DEI on through all the private equity, let's say, back doors of ownership, them and Vanguard and all the other State Street, all the big Wall Street players. They were neck deep in pushing DEI on, corporate America, on the Fortune 500, and now they're trying to, sort of cover their tracks or pretend like that's not what they were doing, or they're, you even have JP. The chairman of JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon, sort of being this sort of, let's say, reluctant milquetoast liberal Trump supporter, which is very strange. And obviously you had Zuckerberg as well. And it's like we're all going to just forget what they were doing during the pandemic and what all the censorship and all the DI craziness that they were behind. And I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah.
I mean, go to my Substack, by the way, and you can see high quality photos of the light was really good, and I used the best gear money can buy. And so I've got high quality photos of the bridges and of the ports that BlackRock wants to buy from Hutchison and that sort of thing. I had a message tonight about an hour ago from a friend that knows the situation very well, and he's very concerned about China. He's like, we got to get rid of China out of here. There's such a problem. But then as soon as BlackRock stepped in, he's like, whoa, and so he left a message tonight, and we talked as well. I mean, that, suddenly he's like, China is obviously incredibly bad. We don't want them here. Right. But BlackRock, I mean, they push the jab, they push open borders, they push all the DEI stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, now we're, it's
like, which one is really the lesser evil here? I mean, in this case, I'd almost say that you're better off dealing with the Chinese. I mean, I understand if hypothetically speaking, something were to kick off over Taiwan, let's say, the Panama Canal becomes it has to be secured, right? Because you can't transfer the U.S. Navy from the Atlantic to the Pacific without it. Well, not easily anyway. I mean, you could go around the Horn, but that would have serious operational consequences for the U.S. Navy, right? So, I mean, from that perspective, there is a national security case, a very strong one to make for, the U.S. military having some presence there and keeping an eye on what's going on there, everything that's going on there to do with the canal, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, this is vital this is like the belly button of American logistics and world logistics. I mean, there's 7 major naval choke points around the world, of course, Strait of Malacca and Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb, Suez Canal,
yeah,
and that sort of thing, and in the Turkish Straits or Bosphorus, whatever you want to call it. So I mean, there are there's these vital choke points, and it's very clear. You heard when Trump gave a speech, he talked about canals. He talked about the Panama Canal and then canals with an S.
Yeah.
I think one of those canals that he's talking about is Suez. I mean, quite clearly.
Yes.
And because I think what they want to do is we've got a huge battle of oligarchs going on, right?
Right.
And I think in the Trump is in the Zionist park. He's a Zionist, right?
Yeah.
And he's openly Zionist. And the Zionist park they have huge influence here in Panama, like significant that nobody knows about, right? But it's actually everybody here knows about it.
A big Chabad Lubavitch presence, would you say, there in Panama City?
And they want to take the canal. So in China and the Zionists fight like crazy, right? And they study each other. They do a lot of warfare against each other that most people don't quite see. We were just down in Argentina for 2 months. It'll be there as well. But let's go back over to the Middle East. What's going on in Gaza now is about numerous things. One is the energy off of Gaza. Another
the gas field.
Yeah. Another is the it's just great land too. And another is ultimately Suez Canal, right? Mm-hmm. And possibly the Ben Gurion Canal, and also the Indo-European corridor from Mumbai over to UAE through Saudi, through Jordan, through Israel, through Gaza.
I think last time we even talked about, or maybe it was the third time we had, the second time we had you on, we talked about, you and I, the massive Saudi investment in the far northwestern corridor of Saudi Arabia, right? The Neom, this whatever is it called, the line, which seems kind of crazy.
City.
Yeah, that linear city that will be seen visible from outer space. I mean, it's so grandiose, and the Saudi. But I can tell you this. I mean, the guy we talk to, that we deal with, our Mideast property consultant, KT, he's like, Saudi's going to be the next UAE, and there's big money being invested on the Red Sea coast, and we're even probably going to be listing, at some point, maybe some of those properties on our site. That's a little bit, let's say, futuristic for us, but it's probably going to happen. I mean, we're going to have UAE properties on our site. But I didn't mean to get off into the tangent of the Middle East. But I'm glad that you're saying how the Middle East is connected to Panama, because that's not a connection that a lot of people see. I mean, they hear about the China connection, but in terms of Middle Eastern investors, whether or not, say, given how close Trump is to, obviously not only the Israelis, but the Emiratis as well, that we could see a big, Emirati or Saudi investment in the canal once, if, as let's say, an alternative, a third alternative to this BlackRock China dichotomy, right? Which nobody in MAGA likes either party, right? So maybe the Saudis will swoop in, or whatever that company that was the Emirati one, Dubai Ports World, I think it was called, that was, sort of first hit the American headlines back in the late 2000s when they were investing in, major ports around the world. And now, they were investing, the Emiratis were investing in the port of Batumi in Georgia, actually in the Black Sea there, several years ago. So, I mean, this is all coming to a head, as you said. And in terms of the timing of it, you mentioned a few minutes ago, Hegseth's coming in. You've got Easter coming up on April 20th, which weirdly happens to coincide with Hitler's birthday this year, which is sort of a cult holiday, for the dark side. They always try to do some bad stuff around the 20th or 21st, Lenin's birthday, right? The day after Hitler's birthday. And yet, so I'm thinking about all the timing of this, and I think you're absolutely spot on. If something's going to happen, it's probably going to happen, in springtime during the dry season, right?
It's dry season. Actually, it's been raining a lot, weirdly.
Yeah.
And of course, last year it was pretty doggone dry. And
right.
This season is very, very wet. and a lot of the traffic that has not been able to make it to the Suez actually has come through here, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're going to, you saw, Trump is bombing the Houthis now, and they're going at it right now because the Bab al-Mandeb and the Suez have lost a lot of business.
Yeah.
And
billions and billions of dollars. The Egyptians are really hurting. And obviously, I'm sure Sisi's people, our guy in Cairo actually met Sisi a few months ago. He got invited to the presidential palace. He doesn't like to talk about it, but he was in a pretty elite unit in the Sinai, and they killed a lot of Daesh terrorists. I'll just leave it at that. But basically, he met the boss. He met the big pharaoh. And but Sisi's got a lot of problems. Obviously, economically, Egypt is hurting badly from the loss of the Suez Canal revenues. It's their second biggest source of revenue after tourism.
Right. I mean, and obviously imperiled. And it's also clear again that the greater Israel has, aspirations. And the greater Israel includes pieces, just like China wants to take over Panama. The greater Israel, I've never seen anybody say at all what I'm about to tell you now.
Okay.
Even I have only said it a few times, but I've never seen anybody say it. It's clear to me that the greater Israel includes places like Panama and Argentina. That may sound crazy, I know, but just write it down.
It's not crazy to what we've heard from our guy down there, David Siegel. Believe me, as far as Milei, and especially, unfortunately, the one of the very first things Milei did was move the Argentine gold to London, of all places, which is kind of ironic. Obviously, if you know the history, that Argentina and Great Britain fought a war over the Malvinas, the Falklands, in 1982, and David,
it's still highly contested.
Right. And our guy, David, he's very pro-Argentine, and, he thinks it was very unjust what happened with the Reagan administration, obviously favoring our Five Eyes ally over our hemispheric ally at the time, Argentina. We picked a side, and we picked the Brits. And, in all fairness, the population wants to stay British. I understand that from a self-determination perspective. I just don't understand why they couldn't have found, if cooler heads had prevailed, and let's say the bankers weren't driving war, maybe to boost Thatcher's numbers or whatever at the time, she was quite unpopular before that war, that, a solution couldn't have been found of just binational citizenship. Just do what they did in Hong Kong, right? I mean, if you want to keep your British passport, you can keep your British passport, right? And you could have gotten an Argentine passport as well, and just sort of created it, made, the Falklands a special administrative region, right? But instead, they had that stupid war, and a lot of, brave Argentine boys and some Brits died, British boys died. And for what, exactly. So I've heard about this, and I've heard, the rumblings, obviously, about we've posted articles about it on our Exit Strategy World Patreon, and those articles will soon be moved over to exitstrategyworld.com, our new site, about the whole Argentine carry trade, that Milei is not who a lot of libertarians who love him think he is, that unfortunately he does not have control, even if you assume the best of intentions on his part. He simply does not have control over the monetary policy of Argentina. Michael Caputo does. And obviously, there's a lot of silver wealth in Argentina. You got Bolivia right next door with the massive lithium reserves, maybe some of the largest per capita on the planet of the battery lithium. And Milei's trying to get Musk to build a Tesla factory down there right now. But, that's all kind of in jeopardy.
Crawling all over that place.
Yeah.
We were in a couple of meetings where lithium people were showing up, and I was like, wow, this is quite interesting. Yeah.
Well, it's relevant to Panama, because how are you going to ship it to North America too?
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's discuss that. It's a sort of hidden
book
connection.
On my Substack, I haven't talked about this book. Or maybe I did, but this book is from 1915. I found it in an antique bookstore. Look what I'm using as a bookmarker. It's those gold backs. I'm not going to take it out because I'll lose my page. But it's those gold backs. Anyway, I got it from Mike Adams. But this book from 1915, the canal opened in 1914. So they had the San Francisco. This is called The State of New York at Panama Pacific International Exposition, San Francisco, California, 1915, right? And this book is in great condition because this is a 1915 book, and published in 1915. And so what this book is about is pulling all these people from around the world and showing them how you can use the canal. Like it's got a section on Uruguay here. That might be where the bookmark is actually. And it, it talks about all these different countries. Like, Uruguay's got so many. Oh, this is about state quarantine stuff. But it's talking about how many cattle Uruguay has and the water.
Yep.
It's basically like a CIA fact book from 1915. And it's and after that, the Japanese expert talks after the Uruguay section. So it's talking, like how Uruguay could do trade with Japan, go through the canal, right?
Right.
So it's like, hey, and according to this book, 20 million people supposedly showed up, and San Francisco only had a million at the time, and they say another 19 million showed up, so it was 20 million, and allegedly, which would be a big part of the United States. In any case, but
I think that's a gross aggregate of the number of passengers who came through the port, right, over a number of many years, right?
That came to this exposition. Actually, you could look it up.
Oh, the number of visitors. Oh, I see. Like the World Exposition visitors. Yeah, like the Grand Colombian they had in Chicago in 1890s. Yeah.
How many came up to that in 1890s?
Oh, millions. Yeah, and they had one in 1930 something where it was I think it was 38 or 39. Maybe it was 37 where it was the anniversary of the Grand Colombian Exposition. You can still go to the park in Jackson Park in the south end of Chicago where the exposition was.
Why did they have it in Chicago?
Oh, it was back then. It was huge. I mean, it was the central hub of the whole Midwest for all the rails.
That's why, right?
Yeah, back then. We're talking about late 19th century through the 30s here. We're not talking about modern Chicago.
Right. Isn't that interesting? So this whole
sorry, I got you off on a tangent, but please continue about the book.
That's fascinating. But I find stuff like that fascinating because it's actually important to know that, and it might not seem important to a lot of people, but I can see the little connections on other stuff. But this exposition, again, it's like now we've got the canal. Hey, you guys in Uruguay and you guys in Japan, you come and talk and figure out how you can do business and use our canal, right?
Yeah.
So the bankers are there to loan money for
trade finance.
Hey, guys in Brazil, we'll loan you money and get your businesses going, right? You see how that worked? It was quite clever. Yeah, right? You there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was muted. Sorry. Go ahead.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating because, the bankers are the ones that aggregated, got pulled the capital together really for the canal and, the interest in, Creature from Jekyll Island and Path Between the Seas goes into that. It's fascinating, man. And how the bankers basically pulled all this stuff, and the big industry guys like BlackRock, but back then, and they pulled all this stuff together. And then they had this big exposition like, okay, now use our canal and we'll loan you money to get this global thing going. Globalism's nothing new. That goes back at least a couple thousand years, right? Minimum, right? And it's just that it keeps getting more intense. And there's not as many opt-out buttons as there used to be, right?
Right.
Because now the technology is there where, hey, I can't just opt out of this and move to Uruguay. It'll be globalist there too, right?
Right. They just passed speaking of globalism and the fruits of globalism, in Uruguay of all places, which I know your friend Doug Casey has promoted as a Plan B destination. They just passed a euthanasia law, I think, in Uruguay, modeled after one of the Canadian ones. So hopefully, they won't be going to the old folks' homes and pressuring people in Uruguay to off themselves. But no, I can tell you that we were talking about this topic of the canal and its strategic importance for trade with South America, with the West Coast ports of the United States. I mean, if you're talking about the Gigafactory in California, right? Musk has Tesla there. And they want to move that Bolivian lithium up. Well, it probably makes more sense to go. I don't know about the status of the Pacific ports, in Chile or whatever on the Peruvian side. I know they're trying to connect it by rail to the Bolivian mines. But I can tell you, just moving the logistics of moving tons and tons of lithium out of Bolivia up either via Argentina or via Peru. If you're going to do it from the Argentine side, then it's going to go through the canal. It's going to go from the Atlantic side of the South America up along to Brazil and through the Caribbean into the canal. So
Oh, it's all mapped out. So the bioceanic corridor, when Misako Ganaha and I were in Argentina, we went up there to look at that. Up near they wouldn't let me in Bolivia, but they let Misako go in.
Why do you think they wouldn't let you in Bolivia, or do you want to?
Because I'm American. I'm American. And
well, I know they had a leftist government, and then there was a coup, a sort of coup, and I'm not really sure what's going on in Bolivia now. Now I have to ask my Southern Cone columnist, ESW Southern Cone columnist David Siegel about that, but who lives in Buenos Aires. He's a concert pianist by trade, actually, but he's pretty well dialed into a lot of the circles we were talking about several minutes ago in terms of what's really going on behind the scenes, and also with some of the real estate developers down there too. So it's it's really, I think Argentina is going to be more important rather than less, including for we're thinking about the European outmigration of people out of Europe to the Southern Cone, seeing the Southern Cone as a safe haven from all the European conflicts. I did want to reserve some time left because I know we're coming up closer to the top of the hour. Maybe you can do like 15 minutes of overdrive, but I did want to preserve some time to discuss about Europe, because this is also highly relevant to, we had to the Trump administration. We had not only did you have that speech by J.D. Vance in the Munich Security Conference where it sort of shocked some of the Euro globalists, but you also had, this idiot French politician say that we should return the Statue of Liberty. Before that, you had a French senator give a rant that went viral saying that Trump's betrayed the West and he sided with Russia and blah, 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 blah. And I did want to mention that Conor McGregor, the Irish MMA fighter, had been greeted as a guest of honor at the Trump White House this past week for St. Patrick's Day when he was hosting the Taoiseach, or the Prime Minister of Ireland. And I wanted to get your take on this because you seem to have some really good sources in Ireland. And I happen to have a good Irish friend who's living in the Holy Land right now in Israel, of all places. But what is going on in Ireland? I mean, do you think that there is a real possibility that we could see some sort of Troubles-style violence returning to Ireland because of the government just being so crazy about open borders and letting in so many people, particularly military-age males, into these small Irish towns and villages where they're literally importing almost as many people into a village as the population of that village? So it just looks like an invasion to the locals. It's not even, a few families with kids and wives and, maybe some elderly coming in and being settled. We're talking about a sort of invasion here where they're building special, facilities or setting aside existing buildings, like gymnasiums and high schools and things like that for the newcomers. And is there going to be blood, basically, I guess is my question to you, Michael. And could we see the IRA return as a sort of, anti-invasion force?
Yeah, I was actually just checking the date when we were in Ireland. By the way, you can make a little lens with your fingers if you go like this. So when I don't have my glasses, I'm seeing it actually works. We were there on this. The numbers are really small. We were there on December 1st, 2022. By the way, I'm not making that up. You can make a little lens. I was just a physics freak when I was a kid. So we were there in December of 2022. Misako Ganaha and I, we were in Ireland.
Yeah.
So that long ago, we knew that this thing was going in the wrong direction. And this photo I just picked up, by the way, the one that I shot was of the Chinese overseas police station. I'm looking at it right now.
In Ireland?
Chinese. Oh, yeah, in Dublin. And Misako and I went there, and Misako said it on a podcast. She's pretty well known, so reached a lot of people, and they took the sign off the next day. Yeah. And because we went back. And so I'm looking at it right now, actually. But anyway, so we were there in December of 2022. And because we knew things were going very badly. And now it's only progressed worse and worse. I mean, I get daily updates from Ireland. And yeah, I mean, they're being genocided. It's a soft genocide. Remember, genocides have a spectrum. There's a soft genocide like I saw in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, they I got kicked out of Hong Kong in 2020, but I was there for 7 months of the last spasms of the huge protest and all that. I was in over 100 of those, almost exactly 100, a little bit more. And they were huge, huge protests. And I didn't go to all of them. There was too many. And, but they tried the best they could. But how did China actually take them? One of the ways that China took Hong Kong was they just did just a low-level migration that lasted for years. And so they would bring in these Han-speaking Chinese. They would get jobs as
Northerners, right, who don't speak Cantonese, who would speak the Northern Mandarin. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they would bring them, and so they would get jobs as teachers and professors and policemen, elected officials, and they just slowly took over the cockpit. And they started, if the young people, when they spoke Cantonese, are like, yeah, it's basically like Chinese redneck, you should speak Mandarin, and they would treat them badly if they spoke Cantonese, right? And so it was that soft genocide, right? Whereas they start to rewrite the history books and just basically rewrite your firmware, right? That's the softest you can
I mean,
get. Right.
How do you pull that off in Ireland, though, a country that literally was founded in, if you want to go to the modern, just cut to the modern history. I mean, with the Easter Uprising in 1916, right, where they revolted against the British. And what is the point of all that struggle, all those decades and centuries of struggle for the Irish identity, for their right to be distinct from the British, if they're just basically swamping their country with people who have no connection whatsoever with the Celtic culture? I mean, we're not talking about Welshmen here or Scots, somebody who you can say are like the Irish cousins, right? Because there obviously were Celts in the British Isles for thousands of years ago after the glaciers retreated, before the Saxons came in from the what is now northwestern Europe, the Netherlands and Germany, northwest Germany, and et cetera, right? So I mean, there's been waves, and then obviously the English elite was heavily French influenced after the Norman conquest, right? But in Ireland, it was a very different history, because you had that sort of English landowner caste, and then you had this sort of Anglo-Irish, who are still very, pretty much the ruling elite in Northern Ireland, right? The local gentry, if you want to call them that, were Anglo-Irish. And then you had, the sort of mass of the Irish people who had to immigrate for decades, and populated the Americas and Australia with their children and grandchildren, right? Boston and, places like that. But yet now they're just supposed to sort of negate themselves and say, well, okay, we had a South Asian origin prime minister, right? Vardrakar, whatever his name was. That's fine. But what about, just pretending that, I mean, what you said, change the history books. What are they going to say? That the Celts were just long lost tribe that left India, 5,000 years ago, and now they should all become South Asian. I mean, or become African.
They're going to kill them, man. They're going to kill them.
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, obviously, there's a reason that these populations are selected for males, the military age males. They're not bringing in families.
Yeah, I mean, it's very obvious what they're going to do. They're going to kill them, right? It's like amazingly obvious, right? And it's either right now it's a soft genocide. Many of the Irish are moving out, so that's soft. They're moving to other places like Argentina, Uruguay, right? They're moving to Panama. But now they're having constant murders and rapes. So the genocide's a little firmer now. And some murders, low level, relatively speaking, but they continue to bring others in. These people are the opposite firmware, right? They're not Irish. And not only that, these people that they're bringing in are from many, many different cultures. Masako Ganaha and I went to Ireland, and we looked around quite a lot, talked with a lot of people, saw many things. And it's the same story we see in so many other places, right? They're doing the same in Japan. They're bringing Kurds and others into Japan, which, I spent a lot of time with Kurds in let's say Kurdistan. And I like them. I got along fine with them. But they will be in conflict in Japan for sure. And they already are, right?
Right, because their tribal ways are not the Japanese way of life.
Those are firmware conflicts, and they will not be resolved by let's have parties together. They should not all fish work well in the same aquarium. There's a reason why tribes tribe up, right? You need to have your own base and your own people. People have different ways of doing things, right? And now this is a form of warfare. It's weaponized migration. I got a good book on that here, written by one of the people who does it, an evil person, socialist. But the weapons of mass migration is an old thing, and it's a very effective, and it's a WMD. It's a weapon of mass destruction. So what will happen with Ireland at this rate is they will definitely be genocided. Now the question is, how will that genocide look? Will it go to machetes? Will it go to guns? Will they turn off the electricity in Ireland and watch everybody go Planet of the Apes? I don't know. But at this time, they continue to flood in until the critical mass is no longer Irish. And they're already reaching that, because remember, most of the so-called migrants that are coming in, the invaders, are military age males, right? And so all you got to do is open up some containers, like, with the Hutus and the Tutsis. Here's a million machetes. Have fun, right? I mean, what are they going to do, right? They'll take everything that they want, and they can do it, and they will do it, because in the real world, the one that I live in all these countries all over the world, is jungle law is the law of the land. Jungle law is the law of the land everywhere, including on the big scale. That's why you see the people fighting over Panama right now. People don't want Panamanians. They want Panama. And I've told the Panamanians here, I'm like, you got to be careful. And if you look like you're going to attack that canal, you're going to get attacked. You'll get killed, right? I mean, if it looks like you're going to damage the canal, our army will be here and they will kill you, right? Like, no joke. And they'll be here quick. They can be here in a few hours, right? They can launch from the United States and be here in hours, right? This is no joke. And so because they, you can say this is yours, whatever. When you're in the jungle and you're made out of meat, well, guess what? You're the tiger's lunch, right? Yeah, it's my body, my choice. No, tiger, the tiger's like, your body, my choice, right? And that's the way this really goes in the world. It's jungle law. And the bottom line is, you have to be able to defend yourself, period. And that's why you have to have groups of people together, right? You have to be, because in the real world, Rambo doesn't live alone. He's not going to survive alone. You have to have a tribe. You have to have a group of people that will work with and defend each other. Bottom line. Otherwise, you will be destroyed.
There was an excellent video on that very theme that was released by a group, I don't know if you've heard of them, on YouTube, called Grim Hustle, where the actor who plays this, excuse me, sorry about that. The actor who plays this Russian mob boss on their channel, the Grim, Grim, he talks about how the lone wolf idea that's been planted through Hollywood films, especially the Rambo movies, after Vietnam in the 1980s, is a form of fifth generation or psychological warfare, in the sense that groups that have greater, let's say, cohesion have the advantage over groups that believe in the lone wolf ideal, because they've seen it in Hollywood movies and TV, like, Jason Bourne or John Wick. I think he was talking about in this video I just posted in the chat for the audience. So, it's not easy for me to just pull them up without, the audio going off or an ad popping up. But I just wanted to post that in the chat, because this theme of population replacement has been brought up. It made some waves after the National Pulse, the conservative publication, picked it up about a month later. I think I even sent you the link about how Ukrainian business lobbies are now calling openly for the importation of up to 8 million migrants into the Ukraine. And, we were just talking a few minutes ago about what was the point of the whole Irish national struggle against British overlords. What was the point of all the Easter uprising and all those things that are commemorated in Ireland by, genuine patriots of their country, if, just a generation or two or, later from now, Irish is going to be like, a rare creature you see in the zoo, or just a St. Patrick's Day, green corporate, another crappy corporate, sponsored holiday like Halloween or something, an excuse to sell apparel. made in China or whatever in India by then, or some part of East Africa. So Rasim, I think it was the nationalpulse.com. They had an article up about this, which really all they did was pick up a TVP, a TV Poland report about this from mid-February with this 8 million migrants number of people who would be brought into Ukraine. I'm not sure exactly from where. I presume South Asia or Africa, that would be needing to be imported into Ukraine. And like you said a minute ago, people want the resources, but they don't want the population on it. In the case of Kiev, after the so-called Revolution of Dignity, or the Maidan Revolution that the CIA and all these Western powers sponsored, the new Kiev government, the first thing they did, what was the first thing they did? They passed an anti-Russian language law as an FU, as a deliberate provocation to the southeastern regions of Ukraine that were, predominantly Russian speaking. And they wanted to basically drive off the locals who are pro-Russian while preserving all those resources, the coal beds and the whatever those, rare earths and metals that Trump has been haggling with Zelensky for, supposedly, that they wanted all the resources, but they didn't want the pro-Russian population on it. And now that the Ukrainian population has been literally decimated in terms of the military age male population, it's probably even beyond decimation by this point. By the time the war ends, they're pushing this replacement agenda. So it's like, if you're a Ukrainian nationalist or you're a Ukrainian patriot, however you call yourself, and you're listening to this, just like I said on one of the previous programs with Michael, how do you feel about that? What did you think all that bleeding and dying against the Russians was for? Now that your Western masters are saying openly they want to replace you.
Now think about that, how that could play out. They've got ports there. That's important because you could bring millions in easily by ship. Use Ukraine as if you can do it by ship, you can expedite your invasion of all of Europe, right? You can just start bringing millions, and then they'll take Poland.
I mean,
right?
Ukraine has been a highway for invasions into Russia for centuries, right? The Swedes came through there. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth went through there, but it's also been the reverse, right? I mean, the Soviets, certainly the Bolsheviks, they attacked Warsaw via the Ukraine in 1920, and obviously long before then, you had the Mongols coming into Europe, into what is now Hungary and Poland, via the Ukraine, back in the the 12th century or whatever, when they sacked Baghdad and piled all the heads outside of Baghdad. So there's a lot of bloody history, and by no means is history over. And I think that the main value of your work is it's reminding people that they don't live in as peaceful a world as they had thought, and as they've been sold on. They've been sold a bill of goods, a sort of fantasy version or unreality. And now history's woken up. And somebody had a very nice Substack that I linked to from one of my Patreon articles, where I put up a video by Eric Prince where he was talking about the changes of warfare. He gave an excellent speech at Hillsdale College just last week. I think it was on Friday or Saturday, but the video may have been put up on Saturday, where he talked about how much the battlefield has changed and warfare has changed because of the Ukraine war, and how a lot of veterans still, look down on the Russians and think they're backward and they're technologically inept. And he said, no, in fact, they're quite damn good at jamming NATO shells and guided munitions that were sent to Ukraine. They made a lot of them useless, darn near useless on the battlefield. And he was saying that as a way, I think, of telling his fellow vets, including some of his former Navy SEAL community, hey guys, be a little more humble and stop thinking just because we're America that we're always going to have the technological edge on the battlefield, and that may no longer be the case. You're certainly not going to have a numerical advantage if the big curtain were to go up in the Formosa Straits against China. You're going to be the underdog, and American military men are not used to thinking of themselves as the underdog, right? So this whole question of migration. And this last point I will make, just to remind people that when you and I had a conversation many months ago, I think it was the second show we did together, the longest one we've done, I even mentioned to you that for the first time since the 1990s, with the Balkan Wars we had, between the Croats and the Serbs and the Bosniaks, that you could have, widespread bloodshed in Europe, not necessarily just between Russians and Ukrainians. In fact, no direct Russian involvement at all. That we are maybe on the cusp of the 2030s or 2040s where Europeans will kill each other again, like they did 100 years ago. I mean, 80 years ago in World War II.
James, I lived in Europe for more than 6 years. It's the white people Middle East.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just what we were talking about in Ireland a moment ago. And then you've got the whole situation in Romania is really concerning to me because, here's a very peaceable country, one that was, as you said, was getting slowly, I won't say genocided, but it was getting democided. It was getting emptied out like a lot of the rest of Eastern Europe, right? They had a massive brain drain, a massive population going westward into Germany, into France, and all these countries, even in the UK. There were a lot of Romanians, right? The best and brightest were leaving, and all these communist era towns and factory towns were emptying out. The similar process you saw in Russia after the Soviet Union collapsed, similar to what you saw in Ukraine, and what has been radically accelerated by the war in Ukraine. And yet they voted against war with Russia. They voted for a peace candidate in Kalin Georgescu, and you saw what happened. The EU said, no, you cannot vote for him. He's not eligible. He's made extreme statements. And basically the Constitutional Court of Romania, the highest court in the land, their version of the Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to allow you to vote for this man. And in fact, we're going to throw him in jail. And, John F. Kennedy famously said, as you know, Michael, that those who make peaceful change impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And he was mostly addressing that at the time to the, the Latin American, let's say, oligarchs and, some of the more repressive regimes around the world that even were allied with the United States at the time. But essentially, yeah, you're taking away the ballot box, and gradually the EU is also going to try to take away the soapbox, at least in terms of online speech, because they're going to say, well, TikTok, if all these Georgescu videos were made on TikTok, that was all the Russians doing, and that was Russian meddling, and therefore we're justified in canceling an entire European election, maybe even 2 European elections in a major European country, EU member state, which, by the way, is a violation of all the supposed, agreements that the EU has agreed to in terms of they have a lovely constitution or Bill of Rights in Europe, just like they had a lovely constitution in the Soviet Union, as you know, Michael.
I just messaged to Georgescu, actually.
Oh, you did?
I just messaged to him while you were talking. Yeah, I asked him.
That's amazing. Could we wrap up with Romania? I think, is that okay with you?
Yeah, I haven't been to Romania in years. I mean, I was there years ago, 3 times, I think. And boy, I was there when it was in the transition. The
early 90s.
Yeah, Ceausescu's were dead. They had already been killed. I went to Timișoara. Yeah, early 90s. I went to Timișoara and I went to Bucharest and some other places. And oh boy, what a place. That's the kind of place where you're like, I don't like communism.
Pretty grim looking.
If you go to Romania in the early 90s, you wouldn't like it then. I can tell you one thing. And I was in a lot of those communist countries. I was like, that'll be enough of communism. I don't want that. And that's definitely, you should fight against that by all means necessary.
Yeah. I mean, but the thing is that the commies went away, but they sort of reconstituted themselves as this wonderful, postmodern EU SSR now, where it's like, well, you can vote for whoever you want, but you can't vote for the candidate that wants peace with Russia because, NATO needs Romania as a jumping off point, a base for, assuming even if we have, some sort of peace deal that comes out of these Trump-Putin phone calls, and I'm being very skeptical, but let's just say for the sake of argument, it happens. Well, they need Romania as a base for the next round, whenever they've built up the rump of Ukraine back up again, and obviously Romania, you can't have logistics of taking over Odessa. Again, you were talking about ports a few minutes ago. Odessa is a major grain port, strategic port for, shipping all the grain through the Turkish Straits to North Africa, including countries like Egypt. They're dependent on this grain as their lifeline. You can't control that if you don't have, reliable logistics through Romania. I mean, it's much harder to do through Poland and, going all the way through the northwestern part of Ukraine, right? Whereas, you're in northeastern Romania, like Odessa's right there. Like you just basically get on the highway through Moldova or wherever, and you're just a few hours of rolling your armored vehicles there. And if the French and British are actually going to entrench themselves in Odessa, then they're going to need a pro-NATO, pro-war Romanian puppet government in place. And Georgescu's threatening that, and that's why they're coming down so hard on him.
I asked him a couple of months ago, like, what kind of presence are you seeing from the UN there? He's like, yeah, because I asked him about the Ukrainians. I said, do you have a lot of, refugees and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
And anyway, he was talking about how the UN is helping them and the normal gangsters, the United Nations. That's what we have to defund them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like completely defund those.
Yeah.
guys.
Doji and USAID is just the beginning, and NAD. We got to go after the UN's funding too. Yeah.
Like totally cut it. I mean, it's easy to go after it. You just stop paying them. I mean, the biggest funder of the United Nations is the United States. I mean, United States, if we cut off our spigot, I mean, they're going to start collapsing. They might not completely die, but it's going to, I mean, they're going to wilt. I mean,
well, good luck to them trying to set the new UN headquarters in Riyadh or Abu Dhabi or someplace. I don't think that's going to fly too well. You know, they want to try to put it in Europe.
Well, as soon as we cut them, a lot of others will cut them as well, right?
Exactly.
I mean, and then you need to start prosecuting people that have been involved in the human trafficking and that sort of thing. And that'll take the fun out of being it. That'll take the fun out of getting on airplanes when you used to work for the United Nations and you were bringing children over the borders, right? Yeah. It'll take the fun out of that when they start, when they're flex cuffs sitting on the curb,
Well, Michael, this has been an amazing interview. I think we've covered a lot of ground in just an hour, and I think we're going to wrap up in about at the hour and 15 mark. But it's excellent that I remember you did interview Georgescu, and I had actually intended to use Opus Clip to clip some of your highlights of your interview with Georgescu, and I'm going to do that here in the next few days with your permission. Repost some of those clips on our ESW Rumble channel. Because we are just like, in terms of where we're going, we're just barely ramping up. I mean, we're going to be pedal to the metal by this summer once our app is up and running, in terms of helping people, relocate and move their assets around the world and move out of these more troubled regions into more peaceful countries that are, positioned to ride this out, either because maybe they're geographically out of the way, like the Southern Cone, or they're just they have governments that are strongly committed to their own people rather than serving globalism. But I mean, I do have to tell you that, I really do look forward. I hope you have a chance to interview Georgescu again, but I don't know if they're going to let you interview him if he's going to be locked up.
I don't know. I mean, I set that interview up with Sean Ryan and him actually, and had somebody pick up Sean at the airport and Bucharest. So I mean, I could go over there and do it. I'm just busy with Panama.
Yeah.
And there's so many people I would love to go see, but if I had a jet just pick me up and fly me over and fly me right back here, I would love to do it. But I just can't unplug for a week to pop out to all these places,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you pretty much are going to have to go through New York or Miami or whatever to get over to Europe from Panama. It's not, there might be some direct flights to Spain. I don't know, from Panama City.
Yeah. But the best way to do it is during something that everybody should learn as a young person is, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I learned as a war correspondent, never chase battles, just stay in the battle you're in. Right. And, because, when I was off doing a lot of war stuff, some big battle would pick up somewhere and I would want to go run off to it. And you very quickly learn, don't do that. Just stay in the one you're in. You waste too much time unplugging and replugging, right? And just stay where you're at. Focus. Keep your eye on the ball. The things you learned when you were like 9 years old. Keep your eye on the ball, son.
Yep.
It's the same thing.
Yep.
My eye is on the ball right now in Panama.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, our CEO's core business is gold, and, gold business is good right now. I mean, just past 3,000 an ounce, and he's doing really well in terms of vaulting. And that's one of the things that services we're going to offer through the app is, safe vaulting in Dubai. Panama City right there is one of the actually places where we vault gold for people who want their gold in the Americas, but offshore. And in Singapore, which has the largest gold.
Can you say the name of the place or?
Oh, the specific vault in Panama?
Yeah.
I don't have that information right off the top of my head, right up, but I'll tell you off the air. Sure. I'm happy to share that with you.
Panama, by the way, is famous for its I mean, there's like poems about how pure the gold is here. I
Yeah.
mean, that's one of the reasons there's so many Spanish here. It was a path between the seas, but it was loaded with gold and silver.
Yeah, whether it
either
came from the
gold.
north or the south, it was passing through the isthmus on its way, either because the Incas were maybe trading with the Aztecs or whoever, the Olmecs. I'm sorry, before that.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah,
but first of all, there's the gold that's here, which is really, and then like you said accurately, like Sir Francis Drake was, getting so much silver his guys couldn't carry it, and gold, right?
yeah,
And that were going across the isthmus from South America. But there was also, and there still is, a huge amount of gold here. I mean, this place is famous for its high purity gold.
yeah. Well, like I said, it's the currency of kings, and it's got
Yeah.
a five, more like probably 8 or 9 thousand year track record compared to any other asset. And we do also use digital assets to move assets outside of the banking system, which is very key for some people right now, both for the sake of their privacy and look, even some of the people who have approached us, they are political dissidents. I mean, they have, they happen to be millionaires, but they've basically, let's say, they're not beloved by their own governments. So,
Yeah.
that's something that we are helping people with, and so we're going to be happy to have you back on. Maybe sometime midsummer. We'll see about if the U.S. makes the move into Panama. And the last thing I will say is that if the U.S. does do it, the reaction from certain quarters, particularly the British, is going to be very, very predictable. And they're going to say, "Oh, Putin, Trump's acting just like his idol Putin. He's taking over a country, a small, weak territory because he can. It's just like the Russians when they took Crimea and blah 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 blah. And obviously the situations are not exactly comparable. They're a little bit different because you don't have. I mean, I don't think there's more than 20,000 Americans in Panama. That's probably a very high end estimate. It might be 15,000 right now. American retirees mostly. A lot of them retired military in Panama, right? So it's not like there's no imminent threat to the American population there. But at the same time, as you said, the anti-Americanism could rise in certain quarters or could be provoked by outside powers. So it's good for the expats living there to be, a little more self-aware, maybe a little bit less laid back and more observant of their surroundings.
Oh, I would not be surprised at all if Americans are killed soon intentionally for as casus belli, or there's numerous groups of people that would like that to happen. One is to run the Americans out, like Chinese would just like us to just leave, right? And there's others as well, like all the Americans who are living here, and Westerners in general. And then there's people that would like to have casus belli to come in with the military to Panama, right? So, a few dead Americans dragged down the street behind a car, and that's it. 82nd Airborne's here, right?
Yeah.
And that quick, and nobody's going to
Yeah,
apologize.
I'm wary of both of those type of provocations, and that's why I think people need to stay frosty, as the Marines say. So, Michael, it's been great having you on the program. We're gonna adjourn, but we'll have to have you back on maybe as soon as maybe 6 or 8 weeks from now. Let's see. After Easter and we get into May and towards the tail end of the dry season, we'll see what happens. But I really appreciate you coming on, especially on short notice, and being very communicative. I would love to, talk to you next time about Romania in more detail if you do head back that way. Because, our ESW Eurasia editor, Stanislav Krapivnik, he was talking about this just the other day, that when revolutions happen in Europe historically, when you look at them, whether it was, 1917 through 1919, or you go further back to 1848, 1849, or you go to 1781 in France, they come in bunches, right? They come in bunches. So what happens in Romania, will impact what will happen in Serbia, or will happen in, in a lot of other parts of Europe. So it's definitely an amazing time to be alive, but people need to be vigilant. People need to recognize that the worst can happen and start, making their exit strategies.
All right. I'll be waiting for your call, sir. I'm ready to go next time, James. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Have a great night. Enjoy your rest of your
Bye-bye.
week. Bye-bye.